Namaste, namaste, everybody. Bruce here from rootsoflife.org. So nice to see everybody again and nice to be back with everybody here. And in this video, I'm going to open up a conversation about the third eye, about Ajna Chakra. Located right kind of in the middle of the forehead, but in reality, back in the middle of the mind, the pineal gland is what we're really looking at here. The kind of the top of the brain stem, as it were. Now, that's not factual, but it's a kind of a good way to understand where we're focusing here in the mind and the body. And a question that I'm asked quite often is, how is it that I can open my third eye? Well, I want to take a step back from that question and just propose a counter question to that. And that counter question would be, why do you assume your third eye is not already open? We live in this world of duality, of right and wrong, and black and white, and open and closed. And if we sit with that duality, then we attach to it. Right? So what I mean by this is if I'm approaching Ajna, or the third eye, from a perspective that it's closed, how do I open my third eye? Obviously suggests that it's closed, right? Well, then I'm furthering the narrative that there must be something closed or wrong or, something to work on or whatever. We have this misconception that the energy centers of our body can somehow be opened or closed. The only time they can be closed is when we're dead, because the energy that flows through our body and is then interpreted or received or experienced via what we call the chakras is simply the energy flowing through our nervous system. The chakras are simply clusters of nerves throughout the body. And I talk extensively about this in my trainings at rootsoflife.org, and there's really too much to unpack within that for this video here. But just suffice it to say that, if you were experiencing a fully closed chakra, then that would mean that your nerves and your entirety of the energy transport system within the body is shut down. Now, obviously, that's not the case because you're active. Hopefully, you're alive enough to listen to this. I haven't bored you enough with this video that you've now passed on. But that's the whole point, is our chakras are already open. We're already experiencing that because we're experiencing life. We're experiencing this thing that we experience as life. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So that doesn't negate the practice, though, or the focus, or bringing the awareness to those chakras. And so for that, there's a lot of practices that we can do. The first one, we do it automatically. We do it every single night almost, is when we dream, right? Dreaming is an activation of the third eye. And notice what's happened here is that the third eye is activating here because the story of me or you has softened when we sleep, right? And what I mean by that is when I'm asleep, Bruce doesn't exist, right? I don't have any awareness of myself. My ego is not, maybe it's fully gone or maybe it's mostly gone. It's at least not consciously accessible by me at that moment. And so when that facade slips away, well, then what are we left with? We're left with a more honest expression of our existence. And in that space, we begin to dream. We begin to have these kind of esoteric experiences, out-of-body experiences, for instance. And we know this is happening because, and this has happened to, I'm sure, everybody listening. That moment when you wake up from a dream or from a deep sleep and you are not familiar with where you are. You might have to look around like, oh my gosh, where am I? I'm not. And it slowly comes back. Your understanding of the space, of the self, all of those things end up coming back, over the couple of seconds or a minute or whatever it might be. That's the ego coming back. That's the conscious mind coming back. That's you coming back into this body, as we kind of euphemistically and literally say. And so as we do come back into that body, it allows us to see that the facade of our experience was quiet. And so in that space, like I was saying previously, the other experiences within us, the flow of energy within us is naturally there and it's naturally highlighted. And so we experience this in dreams or out of body experiences or communication with deities or angels or, the different aspects of like the shamanic realms, like the lower, middle, and upper realms, if that's familiar to you. Like all of that requires us to release the facade of the self to experience the reality beyond the self. Okay. Now, how do we do that? And that can be something that is seemingly difficult, but it's actually not. It's not that it's difficult, but it requires a lot of practice. And there's no easy way to do it. Actually, there is an easy way to do it. And I'll get to that in a second. But the straight way to do this, the repetitive practice that we want to maybe bring into our daily work is simply seated meditation. Aimless, directionless, focusless, I don't think that's a word, but a practice without focus. That's where we want to be. And so how do we do that? We simply sit. We simply sit and close our eyes, and you can place your hands however you want. You can place them in any mudra that you want or simply just on your knees. If you're laying down, if meditation for you seated is difficult, then just simply lay down and lay in a way that you won't fall asleep. So for me, that is propping my back up. And so maybe at like a, I don't know, maybe like a 45-degree angle, my upper back is kind of propped up so that really kind of prohibits the ability for me to fall asleep. And when we're in that space, we simply let go. Okay? When the mind or the body starts to speak, so the mind will speak in thoughts or images, right? And the body might speak in twitches or pains or uncomfortable sensations, numbness in the legs, for instance. If we can find stillness as that is happening, even though it will probably come back. So like if we can quiet the mind for just 1 second, well, then we've done it, but it will probably get busy again. And so we simply sit with it again and again and again and again. It'll move from being quiet to busy to quiet to busy. But the more that we have those oscillations, it's like we are balancing out the scales. And we're taking a mind that is way too active, and we're helping it become a mind that is less active. And then eventually, the norm will be a less active mind. We take that to become a still mind. So with practice, like, maybe you're just starting out right now and maybe your mind is insanely busy. When you sit down, you just cannot literally stop the thoughts in your mind. That's fine. Just simply breathe. Sit with it. And you'll find that maybe the first step is that these crazy thoughts, these thoughts that are seemingly uncontrollable, you might stop attaching to them. They might start to lose their meaning. And so instead of it being an ongoing story that we're staying fixated on, then we might start to notice that as soon as we stop fixating on that story, it becomes a new story. But if we don't fixate on that, it becomes a new one. We don't fixate on that, it becomes a new one. We're losing, or we're extracting, rather, I should say, the power of the mind to control the body here. Every time that an attachment arises to a thought, we release it. Maybe you just focus on the breathing. Constantly focus on the breathing. And see what's happening here then is an active mind is losing its authority over the body. And so that active mind, just like everything else in the universe, if not acted on by an external source, will find balance. It'll find stillness. It could take months of practice. It could take weeks. It could take days. It depends on where you are. But it's not difficult practice. It's simply sitting for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, closing the eyes, and just being aware of the breath. And so as we inhale and exhale, that's what I'm talking about, like sitting, inhaling fully, and exhaling, and feeling the body move, feeling the breath move through the body. Now, why is it that we focus on the breathing? We do that because the breathing has no aim. It's got no story. It's neutral, right? So there's nothing there to attach to. It's simply in and out. That's it. And so if we focus on the in and the out, then the constant chaos of the mind will be replaced by only 2 options. inhaling or exhaling. It's as simple as that, right? The next step is, as soon as we get to that point where we are comfortable in our seated meditation, we're breathing quietly and calmly, and the mind is relatively still, then we start to remove even the attachment to the breath. And again, many of you have probably experienced this. This is when your mind and your body start to dissipate. And so we don't have the breathing to even become aware of. It just becomes unconsciously activated. We can maybe go through full cycles of breath without even understanding or recognizing that we're breathing. It's a very jarring place for the first maybe couple of times that you experience it, because you feel this level of stillness or this level of separation, this level of oneness. That's where we're aiming in seated meditation. And that's where we're aiming to recognize then the full expression of the body. And this is why I'm bringing this up for Ajna, right? Because if we can get to this place of oneness where this facade of Bruce no longer has any meaning, well, then what are we left with? We're left with the full expression of all of the different energy centers of the body as this energy of the universe moves through us. And the third eye in particular is that visionary component. It's the ability to project into the future and see our past and maybe past lives and all of the amazing things that are kind of wrapped up in the pineal gland and in the third eye itself from a more metaphysical perspective. We can only get there if all of this narrative and the chaos in the mind becomes quiet. So that we can, instead of focusing on the noise, we can focus on the stillness. And in the stillness, there's a story or a narrative or an experience that begins to arrive to us. A lot of times people talk about that in religious contexts, like they have these religious awakenings or spiritual experiences or connections to deities or whatever. That's all very real. And it's happening because we're seeing beyond the veil of our kind of limited dimensional experience in this body. Now, I know that sounds maybe pretty metaphysical, but it's the same as a dream, right? Even when you daydream, notice what happens. You lose yourself and just kind of stare off into the middle distance, right? You just kind of gaze outward. This quiets and this becomes still, and we see something else. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about this in abstract metaphysical terms. We do this stuff all the time. It's just that when we do this in a meditative place and space and practice, then we're doing it without aim, and we're able to cultivate the passage of that barrier more or less whenever we wish. We simply need to sit and turn inward. This is Ajna. This is the activation of the third eye, right? And one thing that's really interesting, what you might notice when you're in that seated place, and I'm sure many of you, this will resonate. When you're in that seated space, in that space of stillness, that space of meditation, your eyes might naturally roll up to look at the third eye. You might actually feel it. Sometimes it's actually uncomfortable. If we're too conscious in the body, our eyes aren't able to roll up. But again, this is what happens every time that we are sleeping, right? Our eyes roll. They look kind of upward to this kind of middle point in the third eye area of the forehead. And, if that's all new to you, I'm sure you've seen that from a dog when a dog sleeps, right? When they're laying on the ground, they're asleep, you can actually see that their eyes are rolled upwards. And when they come back, sometimes their eyes have to roll back forward, right? There's a whole discussion on that. It's a whole big topic as to why that's happening from an expression of chi and energy and movement of meridians and stuff that's far too complex for this video. But just suffice it to say that when you're sitting in a meditative space and you feel your eyes rolling up, that means you're just getting a step further into the experience of Ajna. So just let go. Just surrender into that experience and let that happen, right? Now, earlier what I was saying is like this is not an easy process, and it takes, kind of a long time to get there, a lot of work or whatever. And it does from a sober perspective, from a psychedelic perspective, It's kind of like you put yourself on a rocket ship and just blast right up into Ajna, right? And that can be a really incredible experience. It can be a really opening experience, a very healing experience. And for some, or sometimes, some experiences can be really difficult, right? There's a phrase that is, kind of kicked around a lot in the psychedelic space, which is like once you experience it, then you'll understand what people who have experienced it are talking about. I'm butchering that and I'm paraphrasing it up, of course. But essentially what's happening here is when you get deep enough into that space, then you have an active communication with energy. You're actively passing through that veil, but you're doing so with a lack of an ego, but almost like the consciousness of the ego is there, but the ego doesn't exist. And, you know, it's great to hear that in words and terminology and everything, but until you experience it, then again, when you experience it, you're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've been there. And it's an amazing place. It's an amazing and beautiful, humbling, quieting, comforting place to be. All of that as well, if that's something that's interesting to you, all of that I guide and assist people with at rootsoflife.org as well. You can find the psychedelic mentorship option that I have under working with me under the holistic wellness link or tab, excuse me, on the homepage of rootsoflife.org. So, to summarize all of this then, first off, don't get bogged down by the idea that the chakras are somehow opened or closed, because that's a duality and we're creating a story, right? Turn inward, let go, relax, stay with your practice, and allow the experience to happen. There you're automatically going to find that Ajna not only is open now, but has always been open. The only thing that has kept us from recognizing that is this. So I hope you've enjoyed that video on Ajna and diving into the third eye. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments here below on YouTube or reach out to me at rootsoflife.org. And I'm deeply appreciative of a subscription and hitting that bell icon to be notified of my upcoming videos on Reiki and holistic wellness. Namaste, everybody, and until the next video, be well and in Gasha to all.